Bill Gates hasn't been CEO of Microsoft since 2000. He stepped down from the board completely in 2020. The man has spent the last decade focused on his foundation, global health initiatives, and climate technology. But in March 2025, he got dragged back into the spotlight because of a scandal so massive, so deeply embedded in Windows, that Microsoft executives needed him to help control the damage. What happened? Users discovered Copilot AI, the assistant Microsoft forces on every Windows 11 user, has been recording everything they type, not summarizing, not analyzing in real time and forgetting, recording, storing, logging, every keystroke, every password, every private message, every search query, every document you write, sitting in databases users didn't know existed. And when security researchers exposed how this data was being stored and where it was going, Bill Gates reportedly lost it behind closed doors. Because this isn't just a privacy scandal. This is potentially the end of enterprise trust in Windows. If you're still using Windows 11 with Copilot enabled, you need to hear this, because what Microsoft has been doing without telling you is beyond anything even the worst conspiracy theorists predicted. And subscribe right now, because this story is moving fast, and mainstream media is barely covering it because Microsoft spends hundreds of millions on advertising with them. You won't get this anywhere else. The discovery that started the avalanche happened on February 28, 2025. Security researcher Elena Mirovich was conducting a routine audit of Windows 11 network traffic for a Fortune 500 client. Standard procedure, looking for data leaks, checking what information leaves the corporate network. She noticed unusual encrypted packets being sent to Microsoft Azure servers every few minutes from every Windows 11 machine with Copilot enabled. Small packets, a few kilobytes each, constant stream. She isolated one machine, disconnected it from the corporate network, connected it to a controlled test environment, and monitored it. She opened Notepad and typed, "This is a test of local typing with no internet application." She didn't save the file. She closed Notepad. She checked the network traffic. Within 90 seconds, an encrypted packet was sent to a Microsoft server containing exactly 187 bytes of data. She repeated the test 40 times with different applications: Word, Excel, Outlook, even File Explorer search. Every single time, encrypted packets were sent to Microsoft servers within 2 minutes of her typing. She decrypted the packets using a man-in-the-middle certificate on the test network. Inside those packets were her exact keystrokes, time-stamped with application identifiers. Microsoft was recording everything she typed and sending it to their cloud. She documented everything, wrote a technical report, and published it on GitHub on March 3, 2025. Within 6 hours, it had 14,000 stars. Within 24 hours, every major tech publication was covering it. Within 48 hours, the European Union announced an emergency investigation. Within 72 hours, Bill Gates was reportedly in emergency meetings at Microsoft headquarters, and he was furious. Here's what Elena discovered in her deep dive. Copilot in Windows 11 isn't just a chatbot you interact with when you want help. It runs a background service called Copilot Runtime that's always active, always monitoring. Microsoft's official documentation says Copilot Runtime provides contextual assistance by understanding what you're doing. What they don't say clearly is how it understands. It understands by logging your keystrokes, logging your active applications, logging your screen content, and sending that data to Azure AI services for processing. The terms of service technically disclose this, buried in Section 14, subsection C, paragraph 7 of the Microsoft Services Agreement, which is 18,000 words long and written in legal language designed to be incomprehensible. It says Microsoft may collect interaction data to improve AI services, and that interaction data includes input text and usage patterns. Sounds vague and harmless. In reality, it means a keylogger running 24/7 on your computer, sending everything to Microsoft. And users never explicitly consented because nobody reads 18,000-word legal documents. Microsoft knows this. They designed it this way. Thomas Bleecker is an investigative journalist in Munich, working on a story about government corruption. He's got confidential sources, leaked documents, and sensitive communications with whistleblowers. He's been using Windows 11 since October 2024, when his publication upgraded the entire newsroom. March 4, 2025, he reads Elena's report and realizes everything he's typed for the last 5 months has been sent to Microsoft. Every source name, every confidential meeting note, every encrypted message he typed before encrypting it, all logged. He checks his Windows 11 settings. Copilot is enabled by default. He never turned it on. It was just there. He tries to disable it. The toggle in settings says Copilot disabled, but the Copilot runtime service is still running. He opens Task Manager and sees it. Copilot runtime, active, using 120 MB of RAM. He tries to stop the service. Access denied. He tries to disable it in services. Access denied requires administrator permission. He is the administrator. He tries using command line with elevated privileges. The service stops, then restarts automatically 30 seconds later. Microsoft designed it so users can't fully disable it. Even the disable toggle in settings doesn't actually stop the background monitoring. It just hides the UI. The surveillance continues. Thomas spent an entire day trying to kill the service. He finally succeeded using a third-party tool that modifies Windows system files, which voids his warranty and violates his company's IT policy. He's the tech-savvy journalist who knows how to do this. 99% of users don't. They're being surveilled, and they can't stop it. The data retention scandal that made it worse. Elena's discovery was bad enough, but then researchers started asking the next question. Where is this data going, and how long is it stored? Microsoft's privacy policy says they retain service data as long as necessary to provide services and improve products. No specific time frame. Could be months, could be years, could be forever. A French cybersecurity firm called SecureLab decided to find out. They set up honeypot accounts, used Windows 11 with Copilot for 60 days while typing specific unique strings, then sent legal data access requests under GDPR. Europe's privacy laws require companies to provide all data they hold on a user within 30 days. Microsoft complied. They sent back 847 MB of data for one user account over 60 days. Inside that data package were JSON files containing typed text, timestamps, application names, and session identifiers going back the entire 60 days. Everything the test user typed was still stored. But here's the terrifying part. SecureLab then created a new test, typing sensitive fake information, fake credit card numbers, fake social security numbers, fake medical information. They checked if Microsoft systems redacted or filtered sensitive data. They didn't. The full text was stored, including the fake credit card numbers, the fake SSNs, everything. Microsoft's system recorded it all with no automatic filtering for sensitive information. That means if you typed your real credit card number into any application while Copilot was running, it's in Microsoft's database. If you typed your medical information, it's there. If you typed your passwords before pasting them into a password field, they're there. Everything, unfiltered, stored in the cloud. SecureLab published their findings on March 8, 2025. The backlash was immediate and nuclear. Bill Gates gave an interview to Bloomberg on March 10th, his first public comment on the scandal. The interviewer asked him directly, "Did you know Copilot was recording all user keystrokes?" His answer was carefully worded. He said, "AI services require data to function. Users agree to terms of service. Microsoft takes privacy seriously and complies with all regulations." Notice what he didn't say. He didn't say he didn't know. He didn't say it wasn't happening. He didn't say it would stop. He deflected to legal compliance and terms of service. The interviewer pressed him. Should users have been told more clearly? Gates visibly tensed. He said, "Microsoft provides transparency in their documentation. Users can review privacy settings at any time. That's when people who knew Gates from his Microsoft days said they saw the old Bill Gates come out, the aggressive CEO who didn't tolerate challenges. He cut the interview short 2 minutes later, saying he had another commitment. Behind the scenes, according to leaks from Microsoft insiders reported by The Verge, Gates was far less measured. In a closed-door meeting with Satya Nadella and the Windows leadership team on March 9th, Gates reportedly called the Copilot implementation the stupidest unforced error in Microsoft's history. He compared it to the antitrust battles of the 1990s, saying they were handing regulators a perfect case on a silver platter. One insider said Gates told the team, "You built a keylogger into Windows and thought no one would notice? Are you insane?" The meeting lasted 4 hours. Multiple executives left looking shaken. Within 48 hours, Microsoft announced they were making changes to Copilot, but the changes they announced didn't address the core problem. Microsoft's response was a masterclass in misdirection. On March 12, 2025, Microsoft published a blog post titled, "Our Commitment to Privacy in AI." It was 2,400 words of corporate speak that said almost nothing. The key announcements: Copilot would now have a clearer opt-in process during Windows setup. Users would see a screen explaining Copilot uses interaction data to provide AI assistance. They could choose to enable or disable it. Sounds good, except this only applies to new Windows installations, starting with the next update. The 310 million people already using Windows 11 with Copilot enabled by default aren't affected. They'd have to manually find the setting and disable it themselves, assuming the disable toggle actually works, which research showed it doesn't fully. Microsoft also announced they were reducing data retention to 90 days for Copilot interaction data. Again, sounds good until you realize 90 days is still 3 months of everything you type sitting in their cloud, and they didn't say what happens to data already collected. Is it being deleted? They didn't say. Are they applying the 90-day limit retroactively? They didn't say. The blog post also emphasized that data is encrypted in transit and at rest, and that Microsoft employees don't access it without user consent for support purposes. This is technically true but irrelevant to the actual concerns. Encryption doesn't matter if Microsoft holds the keys. And the issue isn't Microsoft employees reading your data. It's that the data exists at all and is accessible to AI systems, to potential hackers, to government subpoenas. The response satisfied no one. Privacy advocates called it insufficient. The EU called it inadequate. Corporate IT departments started planning migrations away from Windows. Daniela Sokolov runs IT for a 600-person pharmaceutical company in Switzerland. They develop proprietary drug formulas worth billions. Everything is trade secrets. When the Copilot scandal broke, she immediately audited their Windows 11 deployment. 480 machines with Copilot enabled by default. 5 months of research data, formula notes, and confidential communications potentially logged and sent to Microsoft. She estimated the potential IP exposure in the hundreds of millions of dollars if any of that data leaked or was accessed by competitors. She presented the findings to the executive board on March 11th. The decision was unanimous. Migrate off Windows entirely. Cost: $1.2 million for new hardware and software. Timeline: 90 days. They're moving to Linux with specialized science software that runs natively or through compatibility layers. Microsoft lost a $1.2 million customer and a pharmaceutical company's trust forever. And this is happening across industries. Law firms can't risk client confidentiality breaches. Healthcare providers can't risk HIPAA violations. Financial institutions can't risk trading data leaks. Every industry with confidentiality requirements is reevaluating Windows. Microsoft's stock dropped 11% in 3 weeks, wiping out $278 billion in market value. Bill Gates, who still owns 1.3% of Microsoft worth about $26 billion, personally lost $3.4 billion. And according to insiders, he blames current leadership for ignoring warnings. Turns out, this wasn't unpredicted. Internal emails leaked to The Information show that Microsoft's own privacy team raised concerns about Copilot's data collection in July 2024 during development. They specifically warned that logging all user input without explicit real-time consent could violate privacy laws and user expectations. The Windows leadership team overruled them, deciding that AI functionality required the data and that terms of service consent was sufficient. That decision is now Exhibit A in multiple lawsuits. It shows Microsoft knew the risks and proceeded anyway. That's not negligence. That's willful misconduct, which dramatically increases potential damages. The enterprise exodus that's accelerating. Corporate IT isn't waiting for lawsuits to resolve. They're moving now. Gartner published a survey on March 20th of 800 enterprise IT decision makers. 61% said they're reevaluating their Windows deployments due to Copilot privacy concerns. 34% are actively planning migration to alternative operating systems within 12 months. 12% have already started migrations. The top alternatives: Linux, 58%, Mac OS, 31%, Chrome OS, 11%. This is an unprecedented shift. Enterprise Windows has been dominant for 30 years. Now, in 1 month, a third of businesses are planning to leave. The financial impact on Microsoft is catastrophic. Enterprise Windows licenses generate approximately $22 billion annually for Microsoft. If 34% of that leaves, that's $7.5 billion in annual revenue at risk. But it's worse because Windows is the gateway to Microsoft 365, Azure, and other enterprise services. Losing Windows means losing the ecosystem, potentially $30 billion in total annual revenue. Goldman Sachs downgraded Microsoft stock on March 24th, specifically citing enterprise Windows risks from the Copilot scandal. Their analyst note said, "Trust, once lost in enterprise IT, takes years to rebuild. Microsoft has lost trust." The downgrade triggered another 4% stock drop. Here's a specific case. Volkswagen Group has 650,000 employees worldwide. Their IT infrastructure is heavily Windows-based, approximately 490,000 Windows devices. On March 17th, Volkswagen's CIO announced they're migrating to Linux over the next 18 months. Reason: they can't risk proprietary automotive technology data being logged by Copilot. Cost of migration: estimated $340 million. They're doing it anyway because the risk of IP theft is greater. Microsoft just lost one of the largest enterprise customers in the world, and Volkswagen isn't alone. Siemens announced a similar migration on March 22nd. Toyota is evaluating it. Samsung already started. The enterprise dominoes are falling. Bill Gates built Microsoft on enterprise trust. The idea that Microsoft was the safe, reliable, professional choice. That trust is evaporating, and once it's gone, it doesn't come back. IBM dominated enterprise computing in the 1980s and lost it in the 1990s. They never got it back. Microsoft is facing the same inflection point, the technical reality of what Copilot actually does. Let's get specific about how this works, because understanding the technical implementation shows how invasive it really is. Copilot Runtime in Windows 11 operates as a system-level service with high privileges. It hooks into the input stack, meaning it intercepts keystrokes before they reach applications. When you type, the keystrokes go to the OS kernel, then to Copilot Runtime, then to the application. Copilot logs them at the interception point. This is functionally identical to how malware keyloggers operate, intercepting input at the system level to capture everything before it's processed. The logged data is temporarily stored locally in an encrypted database file located in C.R program data Microsoft R Copilot A runtime. Most users don't know this folder exists. The data is encrypted with a key tied to your Microsoft account, stored in the Trusted Platform module. Every 2 to 5 minutes, the Copilot Runtime service connects to Microsoft Azure endpoints and uploads batches of logged data. The endpoints are in Azure AI Services infrastructure, specifically associated with OpenAI API integration. The data is processed by AI models to build a contextual understanding of your usage patterns, which is supposed to let Copilot provide better assistance. But once the data is in Azure, it's accessible to Microsoft's AI training pipelines. The privacy policy allows Microsoft to use interaction data to improve AI models. That means your keystrokes could be used to train future versions of GPT or other AI systems. Your private messages, your proprietary work, your personal thoughts typed into documents, all potentially fed into AI training. Microsoft claims this data is anonymized before use in training. Security researchers have shown that anonymization of text data is nearly impossible. Writing style, vocabulary, topic matter, all of those create unique fingerprints that can re-identify users. If you type about your specific job, your specific projects, your specific location, that's not anonymizable. It's you, and it's being used to train AI that Microsoft sells to other customers. Here's the worst part. Microsoft's terms allow them to share data with partners under certain conditions. Section 9 of the Microsoft Services Agreement permits data sharing with affiliates and vendors who help deliver services. Who are those vendors? Microsoft doesn't specifically list them. Could be cloud infrastructure providers, could be AI research partners, could be anyone Microsoft decides is necessary for service delivery. Your data, shared with unknown third parties, under vague terms with no user control. And because Copilot is integrated into Windows at the system level, it captures data from all applications. That means third-party apps you use, like Slack, Discord, or secure messaging apps, everything you type in those apps is logged by Windows before it even reaches the app's own encryption. You might be using Signal for encrypted messaging, but if you're typing on Windows 11 with Copilot, Microsoft logged it before Signal encrypted it. Your end-to-end encryption is bypassed by the OS itself. Security experts are calling this the death of endpoint security. You can't trust your device if the OS is surveilling you. The impossible choice Microsoft created for users. So what are users supposed to do? Microsoft's official guidance is to disable Copilot if you have privacy concerns. Sounds simple? It's not. Here's what happens when you try. You go to Settings, Privacy and Security, then Copilot. There's a toggle. Let Windows and apps use Copilot. You turn it off. The UI element for Copilot disappears from your taskbar. You think it's disabled, but if you open Task Manager and look at background processes, Copilot runtime is still running. If you monitor network traffic, the data uploads to Azure are still happening. The toggle disabled the visible interface, not the surveillance. To actually stop it, you need to disable the service manually. You open Services, find Copilot Runtime, and set it to disabled. You try to stop the service. It says stopping, then gives an error. Access denied. The service did not respond to the start or control request in a timely fashion. Even with admin rights, you can't stop it through normal methods. You have to use command line. Open PowerShell as admin, type Stop Service Copilot Runtime Force, hit Enter. The service stops for about 30 seconds. Then it restarts automatically. Windows has a service recovery setting that automatically restarts Copilot Runtime if it stops. You have to modify the recovery settings. You go back to Services, open Copilot Runtime Properties, go to the Recovery tab, and set all failure actions to Take No Action. Apply. Try stopping the service again. This time it stays stopped, but on the next Windows update, the settings revert. Microsoft re-enables it. You have to do this process again after every update. 99% of users don't know how to do any of this. They're stuck with the surveillance, and even if you manage to disable it, you lose functionality. Copilot is integrated into Search, into File Explorer, into the Start menu. Disabling it breaks those features. You get error messages. Search doesn't work properly. Microsoft designed it so disabling the surveillance degrades your user experience, pressuring you to re-enable it. The Bill Gates response that made everything worse. After his tense Bloomberg interview, Bill Gates stayed mostly quiet for a week while Microsoft tried to manage the crisis. Then on March 18th, he posted on his blog, Gates Notes, an essay titled Why AI Needs Data and Why That's Okay. It was his attempt to defend Microsoft's approach and explain why Copilot's data collection is necessary and beneficial. The essay argued that AI can only be helpful if it understands context, and context requires data. He compared it to a human assistant who needs to know what you're working on to help effectively. He said privacy concerns are valid but overblown, and that Microsoft's security measures ensure data is protected. He emphasized that AI will revolutionize productivity and that some data collection is the necessary trade-off. The response was overwhelmingly negative. The top comment on his blog, with 8,400 upvotes, said, "Bill, you're a billionaire 50 times over. You don't need to worry about surveillance. We do. This isn't about AI progress. It's about consent. We didn't consent." Another highly upvoted comment, "You built an empire on software people chose to use. Now Microsoft is forcing surveillance on people who have no choice. That's not innovation. That's authoritarianism." Tech journalists called the essay tone-deaf. The Verge's headline, "Bill Gates doesn't understand why people are angry about Copilot." Ars Technica, Gates defends the indefensible. Even mainstream outlets like the Wall Street Journal criticized it, saying Gates failed to address the core consent issue. But the real damage came from what happened next. Internal Microsoft sources leaked to Bloomberg that Bill Gates' essay was published against the advice of Microsoft's legal and PR teams. They specifically recommended he not publish anything because it could be used in litigation to show Microsoft's leadership doesn't take privacy concerns seriously. He published anyway. Within 48 hours, the essay was cited in an amended class action complaint as evidence of Microsoft's willful disregard for user privacy. Gates' attempt to help made the legal situation worse. And reportedly, when Satya Nadella found out the essay was being used in litigation, he called Gates directly and told him to stop making public statements about Copilot. The conversation was described by sources as heated. Gates hasn't posted about it since. The government investigations expanding globally. By the end of March 2025, government investigations into Microsoft's Copilot data collection were active in 14 countries. The European Union's investigation is the most aggressive. The EU's Digital Services Act and GDPR both have strict requirements for data collection consent and purpose limitation. Preliminary findings from the EU Commission, leaked to Politico, indicate Microsoft likely violated both. The consent mechanism, burying disclosure in terms of service, doesn't meet GDPR's standard for informed consent. And the broad data collection without specific purpose limitation violates purpose limitation principles. The potential fine, up to 4% of global revenue, which for Microsoft's $211 billion in 2024 revenue would be $8.44 billion. The EU is also considering structural remedies, possibly requiring Microsoft to separate Copilot from Windows entirely, offering Windows versions without any AI integration. That would fundamentally change Microsoft's AI strategy, which is built on integrating AI into every product. In the United States, the FTC opened an investigation on March 22nd under Section 5 of the FTC Act, which prohibits unfair and deceptive practices. The FTC is examining whether Microsoft's consent process was deceptive and whether the data collection itself is an unfair practice. The FTC has authority to issue fines and require changes to business practices, but the more immediate threat is state attorneys general. By March 28th, attorneys general from 23 states had announced coordinated investigation into Copilot. They're looking at state consumer protection laws, wiretapping laws, and data breach notification requirements. Several states have laws stricter than federal standards. California's CCPA, Virginia's CDPA, and Colorado's CPA all have specific requirements Microsoft may have violated. The coordinated investigation could result in settlements requiring hundreds of millions in penalties and strict operational changes.